Welcome, beautiful people of all ages, shapes, and colors, to another episode of the Hit Your Free Throws podcast, where we encourage you to stick to the basics. I'm one of your co-hosts, TV, aka TV on Basketball, alongside my co-host, Jay, aka the Knockdown Jay. How's it going, my guy?
Bro, it's going excellent. TV, you are finally here. Down to two.
We are down to two, the best from the West and the best from the East, the number 8 seed in the East. Who knows? But man,
Yeah.
it was a crazy road to get here. But we are finally here. We're gonna break down this entire finals matchup in today's episode, as well as talk about some of the news that's been going on and a potential new member to the Shanghai Sharks. Who knows? But it's gonna be a damn good episode. Thank you guys for joining us. But before we start,
That's villainous, bro. That's villainous, bro. Oh my gosh.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That was a bit much. That was a bit much. But we
Uh,
will get. We're gonna get to a lot of stuff on today's episode, and of course, we're gonna cap it off with a quiz. But before we get to this episode, we do have to plug our socials. Remember to follow our individual pages at the Knockdown J at TV on Basketball. Our links will be found in the description below. And in terms of the Hit Your Free Throws podcast, follow us on TikTok and Instagram for the best daily NBA content. If you are on YouTube, remember to like, share, and subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you will not miss an episode. And if you're listening to on any of the podcast networks, Spotify or Apple, leave a review, subscribe, so you will not miss an episode as well. Jay, are you ready to get into some of the hot topics from this week?
yes, sir. Let's go.
Let's go, and we're gonna be starting with some new coaching hires. Two two people from my Raptors bench has gone elsewhere. Firstly, we're going to talk about the big news. Nick Nurse going to the Philadelphia 76ers. We know the history between the Toronto Raptors and the Philadelphia 76ers, specifically Nick Nurse and Joel Embiid. They've had their fair share of words over the past couple of years, and now they're going to be working together next season. Jay, your thoughts on this hire?
So I think this is a great hire, actually. I think, of course, each one teach one, right? Nick Nurse has goaded the 76ers before, right? So one
Yeah.
of the best things to do, one of the best things to do is if you can't take him down, picking his brain might be one of the biggest ways to kind of move forward in the right direction, right?
Yeah.
And I think that Nick Nurse, he checks all the boxes for exactly what the 76ers need. At the end of the day, if they're able to reassemble this team as is, right, they're going to be an expensive team. Like
Yes.
that's set in stone, right? If they bring back James Harden, as I would assume they would want to, they're going to be an expensive team. Tyrese Maxey's a guy they have to have a real conversation about as well. Obviously, Joel Embiid is locked up long term. Tobias Harris is a much friendlier contract now because he only
Yeah.
granted 34 million, still kind of insane,
Yes.
but 1 year left on the deal, so he's an
Yeah.
expiring, which makes him a little bit more attractive. Um, they've got some stuff that they can work with. I think talent wise, when you talk about talent plus their overall continuity, this was the best version of the 76ers that I think we've ever seen. That even goes back to those those better teams, I guess, quote unquote, talent wise. When you talk about Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, JJ Redick, all of those guys on the team, I still think that when you factor in talent and cohesion, this is the best version of the Sixers we've ever seen. So I
Yes.
think that now the X's and O's element is the only thing that really was holding them back. Doc Rivers is a guy who I think is very good at playing. Is very similar to James Harden in a funny way. They're very good at playing up when expectations are low.
Yes.
So it's one of those things where they're very good, quote unquote, front runners because the situation is set for them where they're, quote unquote, overachieving. But
Yeah.
I think that they need to have a little bit more discipline from the head coaching position because Doc Rivers is one of those guys that can do a really good job at getting in front, but he doesn't do a very good job of staying there because of the way the front running elements kind of kick in. And it makes him a guy that when things get tight, he kind of starts to move sporadic. And this isn't something that just started with the Sixers, right? Doc Rivers arguably has the craziest looking rap sheet of blown series that I think
Yes.
any other head coach has ever been associated with.
Yeah.
So now you get a quote unquote tactician in Nick Nurse who kind of covers up that X's and O's element. And now it's talent plus it's kind of the brains plus bronze element that now makes them in a way an even more complete team than what their roster already makes them look like.
Yeah, no, 100%. And being a fan of the Toronto Raptors, over the past, for this whole, of course, my whole life, but also specifically with Nick Nurse over these past 4 years as his coach, what he is very good at doing is changing on the fly. He is not afraid to make those changes, a risk taker, if I might say. Like, we talk about it with Coach Budenholzer, and I think you could turn it to a certain extent. You can say this about Doc Rivers. They have a coaching style which translates very well in the regular season, but over an 82 game stretch, that's going to get you a lot of wins. When it comes to the playoffs and your backs are against the wall, you're going to have to make changes here, there. It doesn't really translate to those type of wins. Sure, Budenholzer's won a championship, but if you look at every year besides the championship season, we see what Budenholzer is really all about. Doc Rivers, besides the 2008 championship with the Boston Celtics, we see how he is with other teams and other systems. I mean, it's not like he's had bad teams. He's had the Lob City Clippers. He's had this Philadelphia 76er team. He had the 3-1 lead with the 8-seeded Magic back in the day, and he blew that. So, very good regular season coach, not really good at making adjustments in the playoffs. What Nick Nurse does is he's proven that he can do well in the regular season, especially he has the talent there at the 76ers, whether Harden is there or not. You still have good role players. You still have the reigning MVP in the league in Joel Embiid. He's going to make that work. But what the other element in which he does give in the playoffs is that when things are working out, if the game plans that they had set up aren't working, he's not afraid to switch it up, and he's not afraid to offend anyone in the process. He's not the most player-friendly coach as seen in the last couple of years. He has called out his players in the media on a multitude of occasions, but that's just how he is. And I think in the Philadelphia 76er team where their players have been kind of coddled, they've been kind of said, good job regular season. They haven't really been really faced up to the playoff expectations. Nick Nurse is going to go into that environment, and whether he succeeds or not, he's going to be willing to take chances, and he doesn't mind doing that on a regular basis. So I think that's what something Philly needs, just someone who's a bit more erratic, a bit more sporadic in that type of sense. And I think Nick Nurse is a great hire for them. Yes, he's had a history against them. Yes, Embiid has had some comments on him in the past. But at the end of the day, I think that all stems from respect for the Raptors organization and Nick Nurse himself as a coach. They've proven that they can get success at the highest level, and even when their teams are quote unquote not up to par in terms of the talent up there in the East, they've still been able to produce wins. Look at, I mean, not this past season, but if you look at the last season and the season after Kawhi Leonard as well, they both were pretty successful teams.
Let me ask you a question real quick, though, TV, because I feel like we can't leave off the topic of Nick Nurse without asking about the James Harden element.
Yes.
I know it's kind of beating a dead horse to a certain extent because it's a topic that's going to be brought up, I think, a lot throughout this offseason until free agency really starts to engage. Yeah. But something that's notable about the coaches that were under consideration for this head coaching job was that Mike D'Antoni was in the conversation as one of the guys to potentially take over as the 76ers head coach.
Yeah.
The fact that there's rumors about James Harden that almost seem to have him inevitably going to the Houston Rockets, so much so that other players have already verbally made it clear that they would be enticed to go to the Houston Rockets this offseason as well. Patrick Beverley most notably mentioned on his podcast that the Houston Rockets actually had interest in him when he became, a quote-unquote free agent on the buyout market. And with James Harden potentially going back there, they could link back up. They played with each other back on the Houston Rockets in James Harden's original stint. And obviously they're going to have a ton of money. They're going to have a ton of young assets to potentially trade around and make moves. So you put all of that into context. Nick Nurse being hired instead of Mike D'Antoni, the James Harden rumors, the setup that Houston has, including where their draft pick landed in this year's draft class, where that could be really advantageous to them to have this top draft capital along with the guys that they have.
Yes.
Does this kind of solidify that he's gone? Or do you feel like even though all the tea leaves are there, there's still kind of this sign of hope that Sixers fans should have that James Harden is going to return?
I think this hiring really doesn't really give that much of an indication. I mean, Nick Nurse, yes, is a win now type coach, but we don't know what type of situation Harden wants to be in going forward. Is he still want to be in that winning culture here in Philly? Because his best chance to win is with Philly. It's 100% with Philly. Him going to Houston signals, I'm on my last payday. I want to still be the guy to, put up how many shots a game, be the leader of this team, accelerate this rebound, even though it might not be a title contender. I think we just don't know like what James Harden's like mindset going into it. So I think it's gonna be very interesting to see how. I mean, he's basically him and Kyrie are like the two free agents, which is gonna be extremely interesting to see how things like really like fall out with them, because it feels like it's one or the other. Either for Kyrie to stay in Dallas or go to LA. If it's with James Harden, it's either stay in Philly or go to Houston. So it's gonna be very interesting to see for that. I think either way, Nick Nurse is gonna either one, thrive on like the expectations the 76ers has and actually have everyone play their roles with James Harden there. Or if James Harden does leave, Nick Nurse is a good coach at developing talent as well. I mean, Joel Embiid is already a solidified star. That is 100% like a true fact there. But players like Tyrese Maxey, we've seen the jump that Siakam has made under Nick Nurse. Maybe he can even take that next step. You see people like Paul Reed, who has shown some flashes in the postseason. Maybe he can like solidify into himself into a bigger role. Tobias Harris's contract, like you mentioned earlier, it's a bit more enticing now. That's on a 1-year deal. Maybe flip him for some pretty solid role players. Maybe use that extra money that you're not paying with James Harden to get some of those like role players on the market. And you know what? It's potentially looking like something like this Raptors team from 2019. I'm not saying it's actually going to be the case, but when you have like a solidified star, Kawhi Leonard, now Joel Embiid, a rising star in Tyrese Maxey, aka Pascal Siakam, and a bunch of just good role players. I mean, who's going to be the Kyle Lowry? That's obviously going to be the question, but it's starting to like build towards that. And I think that with either situation, with or without James Harden, I think that Nick Nurse is going to get the best out of that Philly team.
I think that's a great point. I think it's good to also look at it from the perspective of, okay, what does Nick Nurse, how does Nick Nurse operate if things are to move in a direction where the best case scenarios don't land, right? I think that's a great way to look at it, because at the end of the day, Nick Nurse has to have some kind of standing power in this. Otherwise, why does Nick take the job outside of the fact that, okay, yes, Philly is a game changer in this current climate as a potential contender, right? Season in and season out. But I think the most important thing too is, what is the functionality of him as a coach moving forward if those things do not land, right? Joel Embiid now is entering the 30-year-old stage, right? James Harden is a guy that, yes, he's trying to secure one more long-term bag, but he is a guy that I think from a physical limitation standpoint is going to slowly but surely hit that wall, especially as a guy who's very dependent on foul drawing, as his Joel Embiid too. Two guys who are very dependent on foul drawing as a good way of generating offense on a night-to-night basis. There's a lot of things that come with taking this job that go much further beyond, with these two guys in our locker room, we are championship contenders. So I think it's a good part of it that you have to wonder, okay, what's enticing for Nick Nurse? There are some elements there where if this thing does blow up, it's moldable clay for him. And it's in a big market. He's still got a solid guy like Tyrese Maxey in the fray. You mentioned Paul Reed beforehand. Obviously, their draft capital situation is a little tight. That's maybe the part that gets a little tough with them. But I think that things could ease. No, I don't want to say easily, but I think there's a pathway for them to be able to retain certain draft capital using a couple of moves here and there. I think I agree with you that I don't think it necessarily solidifies anything in terms of James. I will push back in the sense that I do think that it does nudge more in that direction, though. I do think that, I don't think it definitively says, yep, James is out, but I do think that is a small indication that things are leaning closer to him leaving as opposed to him staying. Mike D'Antoni's name being in the conversation and them making their decision, not only to elect to go with someone else, but how quickly they were actually open to making this coaching hire, I don't want to say gives cause to pause, but it makes you wonder about how this situation is going to unfold.
100%, and it's something to look out for, especially with free agency coming basically a month away. We're almost in June. We are 1 month away from the offseason, so it's gonna be exciting. It's gonna be extremely interesting to see how the James Harden factor plays in all this. But I will say this for sure before we move on to the next coaching hire: if you have James Harden, if you have Joel Embiid, and you have Nick Nurse, the refs are gonna get an earful next season. As much as I love Nick Nurse, This guy has one of the biggest mouths in the league in terms of coaches. So refs are gonna hate playing. We're gonna hate
Yeah.
officiating a 76er game. And imagine the free throws. Imagine, oh, it's gonna be insane. It's gonna be. There might be one of the most unlikable teams in the league, like 6 months from now. If they're not already, to be honest, if they're not already, but who knows from now. But like I mentioned, there was another Raptors guy on the bench who got hired as a free agent. Sorry, it's not a free agent, a head coach. Adrian Griffin. He's been in coaching rumors for feels like for years now, and he finally is getting his big break, signing with the Milwaukee Bucks, the team that lost to 5 to the Eastern Conference champion Miami Heat. Relatively new coach. We don't know much about him. All I know is that he has a lot of respect from players around the league. I know that the time that he was like sometimes like taking over for Nick Nurse as a um like in terms of like an interim role is like if Nick Nurse was away and stuff, the players have mad respect for him, and I think that's kind of similar to like kind of his standing around the league. Jay, what do you think is like? What do you think of this hiring?
I think the most interesting thing is the fact that for a first time head coach to be taking over a team that has the kind of championship equity that they have, it will be interesting to see how much control they give him out the gate. I think one of the most interesting and most important things to look at when you talk about hiring a first time head coach for a championship caliber team is to look back at the dichotomy between how the Lakers treated Frank Vogel as a seasoned veteran coach for that team, as opposed to how they treated Darvin Ham as a first time rookie head coach this season, right?
Yeah,
So I think when you look at that dichotomy, we got to see the growing pains of Darvin Ham throughout the opening portion of the season. We have to remember this was with an undermanned roster, a top heavy roster at that. And Darvin Ham was given the ability in ways that a seasoned coach like Frank Vogel was not. He was given the ability and latitude to be able to say, Russ, I need you to come off the bench and be a 15-point per game scorer, give us some assists, be a high energy guy for us. And the respect from the players translated in a way in which he was able to accept that, willing to accept that, and it actually worked out in a solid role for him in a way that actually made him a much better trade asset when the time came,
yeah,
right? And
yeah,
really ended up leading on to a change in their season. I think that Darvin Ham throughout the year got better as an X's and O's coach. I think we saw in the playoffs that yes, talent carries in a big time way, but I think Darvin was forced to come up with a lot of different adjustments, including one that he didn't come up with maybe soon enough, but
yeah,
definitely was notable in terms of stepping back on D'Angelo Russell's minutes in the
yeah,
series against the Nuggets and saying, wait, Dennis Schroeder does a much better job against Jamal Murray, both offensively and defensively. I know D'Lo's a guy who's gonna be a legitimate player for us. And I know that he's going to be an interesting dude that we talk about this offseason in terms of retaining him. But in terms of winning this series, this guy, Dennis Schroeder, gives us a better chance. And although
yeah,
they went to it late, he had the wherewithal to go into that and actually be effective. Same with being able to identify Rui Hachimura's skill set guarding Jokic in the series, right?
yeah,
I think a lot of people made this comment. I think it's a great one. And it's actually a testament to Darvin Ham. Yes, that Nugget series was a 4-0 sweep, but that was one of the most competitive sweeps we've seen in a long time. There's
yes,
gentlemen sweep series that don't look nearly as competitive as the series that the Lakers just gave the Nuggets. And
yeah,
I think that's great to know because I think it comes from belief in the guy at the top. Yes, LeBron James is there. Yes, Anthony Davis is there. But with the kind of talent that they had outside of those two guys,
yeah,
it really does come down to whether your coach can coach. And so that all comes back down to Adrian Griffin. We've seen, I think you mentioned it to me off camera. Maybe we can try to find them, but Giannis Antetokounmpo showed
yeah,
praise for Adrian Griffin.
yes,
That belief in your head coach can carry a lot in situations like that where you go into a series where you're asked to play above your pay grade. Darvin Ham got the most out of a guy in Austin Reeves. Might get the guy in Austin Reeves paid this summer for all we know,
yes.
right? these are the different things that we have to take into consideration when looking at a guy like Adrian Griffin. The reality is the league is going to slowly but surely start transitioning to these sub 40, sub 50-year-old guys who have a different view of the game, are coming off the bench from a different perspective, and a lot of these dudes have respect despite the fact that they might not have been the head guy before. And I think that means we're going to get a really good new flavor for the NBA. So I think that's interesting because I want to see what can Griffin do to make Giannis better, which sounds crazy to say, right?
Yeah.
Consider who Giannis already is as a player, right? A top 3 MVP candidate kind of guy. But that's going to be the interesting thing. And if it's not Giannis, how does he make the team around Giannis that much better in terms of development? Because at the end of the day, these guys are competing for a championship with the way their roster is constructed.
Yeah, 100%. You took a lot of the words out of my mouth, but the one thing I really wanted to add to this is that we've seen this with the Trailblazers. We've seen this, like you mentioned, with the Lakers. When you get a first-time head coach in Billups and Darvin Ham, adding to a team which has aspirations to go to the finals or to have like a deep run in the playoffs. If you're going to hire a first-year head coach, you're going to need someone who has respect from the players. And who better to get more respect from players from someone who has been in that locker room before? Adrian Griffin, Darvin Ham, Chauncey Billups have all been on the other side. They have all been on the other side as former players, and I think that is like something like key to look at this when you look at like these like first time head coaches getting like these big time roles, because it's different from like a Mike Daniel getting like a role with the Oklahoma City Thunder, getting his first gig there. It's a different with Will Hardy being promoted as the Jazz head coach. They are in completely rebuilding situations, wanting to build a culture, starting with them. With Adrian Griffin coming there, they want to have a player's voice in there. Someone who understands where the players are coming from. And I think that just provides like another element of, respect there. Yes, Mike Budenholzer definitely had the respect of the players for sure, but it's different. It's different. You could talk to Adrian Griffin a lot differently than you could talk to a Mike Budenholzer, because that Adrian Griffin has been on the other side of the locker room. He knows that he has been to the trenches like many of them there from years before. So I think this trend of getting these first-year head coaches off, being assistant coaches for a long time, being a former player is a big part of it. And I think that the Bucks having going with this Adrian Griffin role, giving Adrian Griffin this position rather than someone like Nick Nurse, who they say that he pulled out, but we never really know. But Adrian Griffin, like I mentioned, had the respect of the Raptors players back then. He was the guy that players were able to talk to. This is someone who can be sympathetic to player issues. He could be looking at certain situations, like for example, being down to the Miami Heat 3-1. He's gonna approach that a lot differently in the way that he is conducting himself compared to Mike Budenholzer. So I think it's gonna be a good hiring again. I don't know how we haven't seen him as a bench boss, so this is gonna be a good testament, especially with a talented team like the Milwaukee Bucks. But I do think that with the thumbs up from Giannis and, of course, talking with some of the top guys on the team, I think having Adrian Griffin on the sidelines is going to be a really good get for the Milwaukee Bucks. He has been in line for a head coaching job for a while. I think that the Milwaukee Bucks have done their due diligence, and I think that he's going to have a great shot at it this season.
TV, before we transition, I want to ask you a question, though, because obviously with the head coaches that have been hired, one of the most interesting things left, because we know the names. We had this conversation, I think, last podcast, actually, in terms of the names of some of the guys that are still available, as well as some people that were not necessarily head coaches that got fired. I mentioned that Mike D'Antoni beforehand, guys who are sitting on benches that are looking for head coaching jobs. Out of some of the vacancies that are still left, what do you think might be the most attractive job still on the market? Because, Philly and the Bucks, those are two big time teams in terms of, championship equity, and now they're off the board. So now we've got some interesting project teams left. I still think that some teams' head coaches aren't necessarily safe right now because of the kind of coaching free agency class we have right now, right? So it makes things a little bit more interesting in that perspective as well. So what do you even think is the most attractive job right now, that's left?
Phoenix? I think Phoenix might be the one, with Monty Williams leaving. whoever's going to go in there is going to inherit a team that, like the Philadelphia 76ers, like the Milwaukee Bucks, have championship aspirations with their two top guys being Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. I think there's going to be a lot more freedom with that team too, in terms of like especially with the Phoenix Suns, in terms of being able to influence what type of decisions they make in terms of DeAndre Ayton, type of guys that you want to have into your system, trading someone like Chris Paul potentially. So I think that might be the most attractive job. I think if you want to go with more of like a freedom in terms of like how do you want your team constructed, it might be the Toronto Raptors. It might be in terms of like the talent you have there and like potential trade pieces and stuff like that. And especially when you have like some good young talent there, especially in Scotty Barnes. If you want to like start, I wouldn't say fresh, but kind of start from a place where with lower expectations, the Raptors might be the place. But if you're looking to bring W's, if you're looking to establish a winning culture right away, then it's probably gonna be the Phoenix Suns.
So TV, I'm actually gonna use my question as a way to lead us into what we're gonna be talking about in a second in terms of transitioning to the Boston Celtics by saying this.
Yeah.
It's not a vacancy now, but I think we should have a real discussion about what the Boston Celtics do this summer. Because I think Joe Mazzulla did his thing.
Yes.
But I think there was a lot of locker room situations that were taking place throughout this season that have kind of been sprinkled in conversation here and there throughout the season. There was a lot of times throughout the Miami Heat series where he mentioned that he didn't have his guys ready to play. Things of that nature come up when you talk about a series that they fought for dear life to get back. And Joe does deserve credit for that.
Yes.
But the way they came out in a home-hosted game 7 and went out sad, went out sorry, it puts you in a position. Again, we have to mention it. The caliber of coaches in this free agent class of coaching.
Yes.
This does not happen often, bro. We're talking about former champion head coaches are sitting in the wherewithal trying to find jobs, right? And the Boston Celtics are a talented team with their biggest question mark simply being, is their co-star going to get paid? Now, granted, that's not a light question to ask, of course. Jaylen Brown is an essential piece to what the Boston Celtics do. But they still have a star player in Jason Tatum. They still have Marcus Smart under contract. They still have Robert Williams on a friendly deal. They have an intriguing situation revolving around Grant Williams and his payment structure. Things of that nature. Boston has history behind them that allows them to maybe land on free agents here and there. There's a lot of different things that still makes the culture of Boston a very enticing situation for the right person. And again, Joe Mazzulla did a good job, but we mentioned this. I think we had this conversation beforehand about Joe. Is there a little bit of the Luke Walton syndrome with him?
Yeah.
And that does make you wonder with a class like this of guys that you can reach out to potentially take the helm at the front. Is there a better guy that you could really put in there? Now, having a fourth head coach in 3 or 4 seasons ain't the greatest look either.
Yeah.
But you have to wonder, talent-wise, this Celtics team can't get any better than this year.
Yeah.
So there's only one left. There's only one place left to go.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be interesting, and I think the direction that Jaylen Brown goes is going to really influence where Joe Mazzulla stands in terms of the Celtics organization. Again, you don't want to have like the viewpoint from people on the outside that they're just dysfunctional. They're kind of like all over the place right now, especially with what happened with Ime Udoka. You don't want to be like panicking and like just making like rash decisions. I think this is something you're going to think about a lot because he did produce a lot in the regular season. He was a top 3 coach of the year finalist. Been 1 year. It's been 1 year. And I think, yes, the leash has been shorter on coaches now more than ever. But I don't know. In my head, they got to give him at least another year. After that, you can make the decision from there. But he's shown that he can like take this team all the way to a Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals. He showed that he could help bring the team back from a 3-0 deficit. Another year, I think, is in line for him. But really, the biggest question for the Celtics right now, and he is like right here, and he had a pretty rough game in Game 7. Jaylen Brown. I mean, Jason Tatum, unfortunately, yesterday got injured in the first play of the game. So a lot of Celtics fans are like, you know what? Yes, Tatum got injured, but we got an All NBA player here in Jaylen Brown, a multiple time All Star. He will be able to at least like keep us competitive in this game. No, that was not the case whatsoever. Yes, he did lead the team in points of 19, 8 for 23 shooting, 1 for 9 from three, 8 turnovers. These issues with Jaylen Brown stem back for years. The dribbling, the playmaking, and those haven't improved. And now he's an All NBA player. He is in line for a 5-year, $295 million contract.
Mm-hmm.
I am not kidding you. This is the contract he is in line for. So, Jay, I'm going to pose you 2 questions. One, should Jaylen Brown move on? It feels like he's been kind of hinting at getting away from the Celtics for about almost a year now. And if you're the Celtics, would you give him the Supermax?
Well, here's the funny part about it, TV. We're not big on the collective bargaining agreement because of the fact that there's just so many different nuances. There's a lot of really great podcasts to listen to in terms of getting into the crux of that. I would suggest the Dunked On podcast just as an avid listener for something of that kind of nuance. But something that was really important that was mentioned in the new CBA was the idea that they were trying to focus on teams not being able to go over this apron to like just max out a bunch of guys on your team, right? The idea of almost trying to eliminate the super team element, right?
Yes.
That's basically a lot of what the CBA, they said this CBA was the quote unquote the super team killer was the way it was addressed. And it's because of certain elements like this one. I mean, the one other guy that's in the same kind of supermax extension conversation is his teammate Jason Tatum, who isn't eligible for the supermax this summer, but next summer will become available or become eligible, for a supermax up to more than $300 million. So they have a very hefty payroll coming up. And I don't think that this is a team that necessarily, if they want to stay as competitive as they've been, can afford to have 2 supermax caliber guys on the roster, knowing that this team has thrived best when they've been significantly deep. We've seen this in the past. We've seen this over the last couple of seasons with the Celtics, that when they've been a significantly deeper team than others with a top end talent like Jason Tatum at the helm, they've been really good. Now, he's had the Robin in Jaylen Brown. Sometimes Jaylen Brown has been the Batman even.
Yes.
But I think at the end of the day, I think there's a certain career-based incentive for Jaylen Brown to want to be somewhere else as a potential lead man for some other team that not only maybe can bring out even more elements of him that we haven't seen, but I also think that we'll be able to complement his skill sets in ways that are not as redundant as Jason Tatum. I think one of the biggest things that we say is I think Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are great as a duo, but their redundancy puts a cap on how good they will ever become. I think they will always be good enough to make an Eastern Conference run. I think they will always be good enough to smack their head on the Eastern Conference or the actual NBA Finals. I think they're good enough as a duo to win yourself a championship. And I think that does make you wonder, is the price tag worth it? Is one championship worth the price tag you're looking at? That's the question Boston has to ask themselves. And although I think most fans would easily, unequivocally say yes, there's a lot that comes with that makes this a lot harder of a decision.
Yes. Yes,
so I think just to plainly answer your questions, I think Jaylen Brown has an incentive to leave, and I think the price tag is a bit steep. Again, factoring in the new CBA rules, which makes it tougher to do this for these kind of guys, of building up these super teams with super max players and different things like that. Incentive wise for both the team and the individual player, there is a ceiling on where this goes. And I don't know I think there's an apex where it does get you a championship.
Yes.
But with as steep of a price as this is, again, how much is a championship worth? And that sounds sick considering this is why you play the game. But again, you have to think about the long term future of a team like this that is still super young and has been competing basically since day one. It feels like.
Yeah, that's definitely something to look at. And if you really want to look at like an equivalent of this team over on the West, the Clippers haven't done jack. The Clippers haven't done jack with this two wing lineup. I know theirs is a completely different situation with the way that both of them are injured all the time, but I say that to say the overlap like between Paul George and Kawhi in comparison to Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum is pretty comparable because in a sense where you have two very good individual players, two all NBA level players, but when they do the same thing, you're suffering in other places. In a sense where like
Mm,
where you have like where you have at least with the Tatum and Brown thing, the contracts are a bit more friendly, so they're able to get players like an Al Horford, Robert Williams, and like a Marcus Smart to kind of like round out the squad.
mm,
You could see when you invest all your money into two guys in the Clippers, where the other positions are very much lacking. Ivica
mm,
Zubac, solid NBA player, starting center on a championship caliber team, very questionable. The point guard position has been a problem for the Clippers for years
mm,
because of this issue. Now you look at the Celtics, they've been able to build, like you mentioned, a very deep team. I mean, they were able to bring in Malcolm Brogdon for goodness sake last offseason because of the cap situation they had. You give the Supermax to both Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, that means, oh, Marcus Smart is not going to be able to get his money. Robert Williams is in line for to get his money. You're gonna be having two Supermax guys and a bunch of minimum contracts around you. We talked
mm.
about this with the Lakers last week. When you're in that situation, when you have no draft capital, I mean, at least with the Celtics, you have a little bit of you have their draft capital still, but when you have all your money tied up into, like for example, if they do get LeBron James, Kyrie, and Anthony Davis, the rest of your team's gonna suffer. You're gonna have a bunch of minimum guys around them, and that's just not proper, like good basketball team building. The Celtics
Right.
don't want to find themselves in that situation. Jaylen Brown just made an All NBA team. Yes, you can give him the supermax, but you have someone who's in their mid 20s, an All NBA level player, borderline top 20 player. There is something you can get back. Not
Mm,
just with him, but you can even package some of your other players and maybe get a second star that way.
mm.
There are options that the Celtics have. And I think committing to a Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum duo for the next 5 years on two supermax deals is not wise because you're going to be negatively affecting the rest of the team. You're not going to be able to pay everyone, and you're going to have limited wiggle room to even like make like moves around your team at all. Because when you're in the situation when you have both of these guys um together and like on supermax deals, that means, oh, we're not gonna be able to like sign other free agents because we don't have the money. Oh, we should go over to campus, re-sign Robert Williams, re-sign Marcus Smart, and if that recipe doesn't work over the next couple of years, you're kind of stuck. You were kind of stuck, and I think that they're like with Jaylen Brown. Yes, he's gonna be. I think people are overreacting, saying that he's like a pretty trash player. Yes, his dribbling has been an issue. Yes, his playmaking has been an issue. But I think that just the idea of having these two supermax guys, you've seen what they've been giving you the last 3-4 years. They haven't produced you the championship you guys are looking for with the type of guys around them. What do you think is going to happen when you both give them supermax contracts and those and that depth that you so heavily rely on starts to dwindle? I don't think the Celtics want to be put in that situation, and I think that for the betterment of the team, I mean, let's be honest. Tatum's going to get that supermax one way or another. He is the one who is like guaranteed that. And Jaylen Brown, if he does stay on the team, he's probably guaranteed that too. But when you look 2-3 years down the line to see that the Celtics are going to be in deep waters in terms of the cap space, I don't know if that's something they want to be dealing with in like the short. It's not even that much in the long term future. That's going to come up really quick.
I mean, no, I think okay. Let's piggyback off that. Let's extrapolate upon that even more because I think that's where we have to really start to consider. So you say that Jason Tatum pretty much should be a lock for his supermax offered in 2024. I think I agree with you under those circumstances as well. I also think it's a double-edged sword if you're Boston's front office because right now you're looking at that situation and you're saying, yes, I'm super glad that he made the All NBA because now the Supermax extension is offered to him. That should entice him as a player that sounds like he's a little interested in testing the free agency market. Him being eligible for the Supermax contract actually should be more enticing for him to want to stay. It also works against you in the sense that him wanting to stay makes your team much more expensive, which of course limits your flexibility, as you mentioned before. We just saw how this team out this year. We saw how last season went in terms of being able to, hit their head on the NBA Finals. I think it's very unfortunate that this team keeps getting very close, but no cigar, because it puts them in a weird position because they always go into the offseason wondering, dang, if just one thing different, if Danilo Gallinari wasn't hurt this season, does any of this go differently, right?
Yeah.
So you can ask yourself, if Ime Udoka doesn't have the summer of a lifetime in terms of bad PR and circumstances, does this season go differently, right? They're allowed to play these cards of things could have drawn out a different way, and therefore if we just run it back with different circumstances, we will be better positioned to finally get the job done. That's the unfortunate situation they're putting themselves in. But with that, TV, now we go back to what you just said. Jaylen Brown has one more year left before he ends up being eligible. Do you throw the trade package out now? We're coming off the Eastern Conference Finals. And we're in a situation where we could potentially upgrade at head coach or simply just get healthier by getting guys like Danilo Gallinari or picking somebody else up in the offseason to fill that spot. Interesting decisions to make with guys like Grant Williams and so on and so forth. They can make a couple of moves in the offseason. You run it back, you see how it goes, and then you look at the eligibility and you tell yourself, we can offer him the most money. If he leaves, he's going to have to leave. He's going to have to elect to leave. Or knowing that he would be leaving for nothing, you must, as a Celtics front office, you'd have to understand that. Or looking at the situation, seeing how many times you hit your head on the goalpost, but not necessarily, come out standing on top. Do you take what will probably be your best opportunity to trade a young asset like Jaylen Brown right now to get as much as you can possibly get?
I think you kind of have to develop a trade package, bro. I think it might be that time. And then, like I mentioned, I mean, again, the Jaylen Brown slander is at an all-time high right now. Whatever you hear from like NBA fans is not equivalent to how GMs in the league value him. He is a mid-20s all NBA level player, borderline top 20. He is gonna, if you've seen what Rudy Gobert has gone for, what Donovan Mitchell has gone for, you're gonna see something very similar with Jaylen Brown in terms of the return you're gonna get. And that is extremely valuable to the Boston Celtics, not because they want to blow it up, but they have other guys on their team as well where you can develop a package for another star player potentially to bring into the Celtics. Jaylen Brown, he's good right now. He has been with this organization for so long. I'm all for player empowerment. I'm all for them trying to get their money. And if he decides to stay, I hope he gets his money. But if you're the team and you know that this is the case, that this is like maybe the best you're gonna get for Jaylen Brown, you know the other stuff you have on your at your disposal in terms of trade package, like in terms of trade equity. You could do that. You could possibly bring in the next ever disgruntled star, maybe preferably a point guard or a center, just so you can have something like that can complement Tatum a lot more. I think if you do trade Jaylen Brown, you're not confining yourself to a box. You are opening yourself up to so many more opportunities, and the flexibilities there in the front office. I think that's something that they should explore.
I've seen Anthony Simons. I've seen Karl-Anthony Towns. I've seen your boy Pascal. I think it'll be interesting. Maybe sometime during the offseason, we could do a couple fake trade episodes for a couple of different interesting players that could be on the move this summer, could be on the move come trade deadline of next season. I think that would be a really dope set of content to do with a couple of different interesting players who I definitely would like to see in a different in different scenery, if under realistic circumstances, of course. I'm not going to say like, I want certain players who just realistically cannot or will not be on different teams. I want to see them somewhere else. There's a handful of guys in this league that I definitely could see on a different team within the next year or two. And there's a bunch of beneficial places that if those moves are made soon, this league could get really intriguing. I think this new CBA just made, if the league had parity before, I think this new CBA really opened Pandora's box to what could be a crazy offseason and an even crazier 2023, 2024 season too.
Yeah, 100%. And we're gonna see the effects of it pretty soon once they have that in place, and we're gonna see the full effects of that over the next season, even the season before. Like you're gonna even see more of that effect in the next season following that. So it's something to look out for, and it's gonna be really something that's gonna really affect the whole Jaylen Brown situation, which we will definitely be keeping an eye on. Let's move on to the basketball court because Jay, we have one more series left in the NBA season. The NBA Finals is set.
Yeah.
The number 1 seeded Denver Nuggets taking on the number 8 seeded Miami Heat. They ran the gauntlet. They made it to the NBA Finals after being 6 minutes away from getting eliminated by your Chicago Bulls. Crazy series, man. This is gonna be such an entertaining one. We're gonna make our predictions at the end, but we're gonna do a little deep dive in the series. So Jay, in this series, who has the most to gain and who has the most to lose?
I think this is an easy question. Miami's playing with house money. They're not supposed to be here. I mean, if you listen to a lot of analysts, shout out to my boy, shout out to my guys with just across the board. I've been listening to a handful of different podcasts. The Real Talk with MJ podcast is definitely one of them that you guys should give a listen to. My boy Miles said that before Game 7, the Celtics should not be excited about the fact that they got this to a Game 7, right? The Miami Heat are the team playing with house money in Game 7, and they came out and responded. And I think the same could be said for this series against the Nuggets. They shouldn't be the favorites in this series. They just came out of a dogfight where they almost sold the whole thing had it not been for a big time Game 7 from them. And of course, some will point to Jason Tatum getting injured in the beginning of the game, and obviously that's slowing things down for them, and so on and so forth. But Miami came out and punched them in the mouth and repeatedly came at them and got the job done. The Nuggets, on the other hand, have been sitting for what'll be 9 days, I believe.
9 days.
You know what I mean? By the time that they actually engage in the series, they're kicking back, chilling. They had their own Cancun trip, and they're still playing.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that easily the Miami Heat have the most to gain, while the Nuggets have the most to lose. Because you also have to look at it; it's a team element. We know that. But Nikola Jokic, man, I made the comment last time. He who laughs longest, laughs loudest. And in comparison to Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic got that part of the job done. The doubters who thought that he was not the MVP over Joel Embiid, that situation is out. We've gotten that part handled. The next part is whether or not people believe that Nikola Jokic can be the lead creator, the lead offensive player, the lead superstar of a championship caliber team. Yes, it's the Miami Heat who shouldn't be here. But Denver doesn't determine who gets in front of them. Denver just plays who's in front of them.
Yeah.
If they finish the job, Nikola Jokic will have won a championship in very dominant fashion by the Denver Nuggets, mind you, as a guy that led this team in probably one of the most impressive runs we've seen in recent history in terms of making the NBA Finals. So that's a lot riding on the situation for Nikola Jokic because of the fact that he is a guy who we had this conversation last podcast. I think the last podcast just was super enlightening about the Denver Nuggets, but people still sleep on Jokic.
Yeah.
So it's like I think at the end of the day, we've even had these conversations with Kevin Durant, for example, where it was like, if Kevin Durant had not won those championships, do we still view him the same way? I think at the end of the day, whether Jokic played Boston, Philly, Miami, no matter who the Bucks, whoever they played coming out of the East, as long as Jokic has one-time NBA champion next to his name going into next season, we're having the conversations of, is Nikola Jokic the best player in the world? Is Nikola Jokic a first ballot Hall of Famer already? You know, these things come up. Without him winning the championship, he's still a guy who can't get it done. He's the stat padding machine. His team was healthy and he couldn't close the door on the whole thing. He took down undermanned teams and then he ran into the Miami Heat and they were still just too good. Are you really, you're now anonymous you're now synonymous with being the 1 seed who steamrolled through the postseason and lost to the first 8 seed to make the finals
The
since
second. Oh yeah,
1998.
99. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly.
You're that guy now. So yeah, I think the Nuggets have a lot. The Nuggets have a lot to lose.
Yes, I definitely do agree with that, and I liked how you went with the team aspect. I'm gonna probably go with a more player aspect, and I'm gonna look again with the Nikola Jokic Jimmy Butler matchup. Nikola Jokic has the most to gain out of this entire series. Nikola Jokic, if he wins this championship, this might be bold. He's a borderline top 20 player all time. A borderline top 20 player. Let me remind you, 2-time MVP, runner-up this year, has basically averaged a 30-point triple-double in the playoffs. Like you mentioned, in one of the most dominant runs we've seen in a while. This takes him not like from a top 50 player to potentially a borderline top 20. This is what this win can mean for Nikola Jokic in terms of like where he stands in terms of NBA lore and NBA history. We saw what that did to Giannis when he finally like reached over the top. This guy is like in conversations for top 20. We're gonna have Jokic in that same conversation, especially as a 2-time MVP. Arguably, some people might say he should be the 3-time MVP at this point. That means so much to him. I agree with the point where Miami is basically still playing with house money. They're the freaking 8 seed who made it to the NBA Finals. They have nothing to lose. But in terms of their championship window, this is Jimmy's last chance, in my opinion. This is Jimmy's last chance. And when you look at this, the situation of the Miami Heat, Jimmy's going to be that guy next year. Are you really going to trust these guys to really like go out and make another type of like crazy run like this? Is there many moves that you can make to improve this team? Kyle Lowry's going to be a year older. Yes, Bam's going to be better. I just don't see like this. I feel like this is the chance that the Miami Heat. I didn't think that they had a chance anymore in their window, like coming into this. This is their final chance. Jimmy Butler can etch himself into NBA royalty in terms of like winning this championship again. Mm-hmm. He's going to be elevating himself to a certain level. The thing is, I just don't think there's going to be another chance to do this with the Miami Heat. You've been the number 8 seed. This is the perfect story to really elevate yourself as an all-time great. 8 seed, rolled over the number 1 seed, rolled over the New York Knicks. Granted, he almost gave up a 3-0 lead to the Boston Celtics, but still was able to pull it off in Game 7. The script, as we like to say on this podcast a lot, the script is lined up to have the best Cinderella story in NBA history, led by Jimmy Butler. Mm. That puts a certain different type of pressure in terms of for Jimmy Butler, where he can elevate himself in terms of the all-time rankings. The Denver Nuggets, if they lose this, let's be honest, Jokic is 28, Murray's 25. They might be in this exact same position next year with the Denver Nuggets. I don't know if you feel that way. I feel like
that's tough, TV, because here's the funny part. Here's the thing. Every time we say that, the other thing that we always have to factor in is that no 2 seasons are alike, bro.
Yes.
And we've seen this before. We've seen the I mean, like, let's put it in perspective. The Sixers team where Ben Simmons didn't go for the shot was one of potentially those teams that we thought if they had made that run all the way through, right, that would have been a year for them. Yes. The year, I'll punch on the 76ers in another situation. I think people thought the Sixers were a legitimate title contender the year Kawhi Leonard hit the shot.
Yes.
The Celtics thought after last season going toe-to-toe with the Golden State Warriors, they'd be right back here. And they fell just short to a team that realistically they were better than. I don't think the Bucks are a great example of a team that once, not even that many seasons ago, won a championship. You mentioned were just a part of the Miami Heat tour this year, and they were the first stop on what has been a Cinderella ride for that team. And now Milwaukee has a new head coach and big questions regarding their secondary star and Chris Middleton, who is due for a contract. This team is going to get very expensive and they're already very old, right? So Nikola Jokic, yes, he is the age he is. Yes, Jamal Murray is young. Yes, Michael Porter Jr. is young. But I don't know, bro. I really do think this is a season where if they want to get the job done, I think it's almost just as imperative for them. I know Jimmy might not have as much time, but I don't think it's easy to just say, "Oh, they're a young squad with a big future ahead of them," because I don't think that that's clear cut anymore with how this league is shaping out.
That is no, that's a good point. That is 100% a good point. But when you're a team like that, I mean, like you said, each season can go a different way. I mean, who freaking thought the Miami Heat was going to be an 8 seed and go all the way here? 100%. Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray has, at least, like, for me, when I look at this team and the way that they're built, they feel like they are like kind of set up for the next couple years in which the Miami Heat cannot. This is just just not sustainable for like the next years going forward. So that's just the way I see it in terms of the way like they have the most to gain. I'm honestly leaning more towards your thing. I just was trying to go a bit more, devil's advocate to see if there's like
That's
any
fair.
more. Yeah, but I mean, yeah, no, but I think like either way. I think we both agree in terms of like most to gain. I think it is Nikola Jokic in terms of like his like legacy, but like the most to lose, maybe Miami Heat generally yes they're the freaking 8 seed here.
Yeah,
There's no pressure in them to win the series. Some
yeah,
people
Jokic is in a weird, yeah, like I think the way you just phrase it is why Jokic is in a weird like double standard situation, because I think if he wins, it elevates him, but if he loses, it significantly puts him in a weird light negatively as well. It
yes
validates those who did not believe in him, and it validates those who do believe in him, depending on the outcome.
yes
Like it's one of those things where literally the outcome of this series could completely wipe all of the things that have happened up until this point in terms of how successful he's been this year.
yeah
And I think, again, you look at the Miami Heat situation, they're playing with house money because they were a team that was never supposed to be here. I was literally listening to a podcast earlier, shout out to the Locked On Bulls podcast. They were talking about, does the Miami Heat making the NBA Finals give AK or Karnisovas the built-in excuse? Hey, we were 6 minutes away from beating the team that would eventually host or would eventually represent as the Eastern Conference
yeah
Finals champion, right? And it's like, of course, no, Bulls fans are not going to be satisfied with that as a
yes
legitimate excuse. But it
yeah
goes to show you just how close this team was to being home instead of where they are now. So, yeah, it's definitely, bro, there's a lot of storylines to follow for this season. For this series, considering the fact that there's so much on the line.
there is 100%. Another factor we're gonna be looking at in this series is and it's another question I'm gonna pose to you here.
Okay.
Who or what is the biggest X factor in this series? Either team, or it could be just something in general.
Aaron Gordon cannot get away with just being in the dunker spot for this series.
Yeah.
He cannot get away with just being in the dunker spot on this series. Aaron Gordon is going to be, I think Aaron Gordon is going to be so important because I think that him and Bruce Brown in particular are high effort, high energy guys that are going to have to set the tone in terms of matching the physicality that the Miami Heat play with. One of the most important things to note from game 7 isn't the way the Miami Heat won. It was under the circumstances of how this team is built and how it reflects in that victory. The Boston Celtics might be the younger team, but we know how the Miami Heat get down. You got to pass a body fat index test just to be able to get on the court for this team. You know what I'm saying? That's the
Yeah.
Pat Riley way. You have to be built a certain type of way. You have to be in a certain kind of physical shape to even see minutes on the floor for this team. And I think that when you talk about a hard fought 7-game series like this one that we just saw from Miami versus Boston, we saw that the more conditioned, more experienced to a certain extent, more physically capable team in the Miami Heat was the team that not only rose to the occasion, but they played in a way that they literally imposed their will on the Boston Celtics. And I think that if Denver does not have the capability to match Miami, this series could get sticky. Now, Denver has the equalizer. Most people don't speak on it because basketball is played indoors, but elevation is still a thing here, right? I think Miami's built for it, but I think at the same time it's not underrated. A lot of players listen to their interviews, speak on the elevation in Denver being a real element, a real aspect of home court advantage that not many places have favored to. So it's going to be interesting to see how those different things factor in this series. But I think Aaron Gordon and Bruce Brown, their ability to set the tone from a physicality standpoint, they cannot be guys that just stand around. They are going to have to be active on the glass. They're going to have to be big time around the basket. They're going to have to be big time as cutters. And I think if you're a Denver Nuggets supporter in this situation, you want to see them bring that physicality on the defensive end because it's going to be one of the biggest factors of the series for what they can do against guys like Jimmy Butler and, dare I say, one vote away from being Eastern Conference MVP Caleb Martin.
Yes. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
The physicality aspect is going to be massive because Heat culture, Heat whatever. The Miami Heat have just taken the personality of their star and Jimmy Butler and has spread through the rest of the guys. Each and every one of them has this sounds really cheesy, but they all have that dog in them. You know what I mean? They always have that, they have that toughness, that grit factor that is just unmatched with anyone in the league. Just look at the team that they steamrolled on the way to go to the NBA Finals. Aaron Gordon and Bruce Brown have to be those guys for the Denver Nuggets to at least compete on that end and the physicality aspect. Because a lot of their guys, especially when you look at their 3 stars like Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, and Michael Porter Jr., very finesse, we're gonna go around you instead of through you. So that's going to be I like that choice of having a Bruce Brown, Aaron Gordon sort of thing being the biggest X factor. But for me, the biggest X factor, of course, it's not going to be the stars. We know what Jokic is going to give you. You know what Jimmy Butler is going to give you. At this point, we know what Jamal Murray is giving you. And even if the role players, the role players of both of these teams have been some of the best role players that we've seen throughout this entire playoff run. The Nuggets and KCP, Bruce Brown. We mentioned Aaron Gordon, Jeff Green at some aspects. And then on the Heat side, Max Strus, Kyle Lowry, Gabe Vincent, Caleb Martin. They've all had, their moments. They've all had that consistent factor about them. And that's what's led both of these teams to the finals. But the one guy I didn't mention, and he can't get away with this type of thing, especially in this series, Bam Adebayo. Bam Adebayo cannot get away with a 15 points a game, 9 rebounds, 4 assists series against Nikola Jokic. He just can't. The Denver Nuggets are going to put up points in a hurry. We need to see all NBA level Bam. We need to see the Bam who can show Jokic like elements in his passing game. Someone who can attack the paint and take advantage of the somewhat mismatch he has against Nikola Jokic. He has the physicality factor, the athleticism. We need to see that on full display. He got away with that in the last series against the Boston Celtics because of players like Gabe Vincent stepping up, Kyle Lowry stepping up in key moments, Caleb Martin, who averaged 19 points a game, like you mentioned. He almost won Finals MVP. It was like one vote, Conference Finals MVP. It was one vote away. Bam Adebayo was kind of just like in the middle of all that, and especially in the last 2 games of the series, 25% in game 6, 40% in game 7. At times, Bam just looked unsure of himself. He didn't look confident whatsoever. In a series against the Denver Nuggets, when you have the athleticism and again the physicality advantage over someone like Nikola Jokic, Bam needs to assert his presence. We know the number 2 guy in the Denver Nuggets has been consistent enough in Jamal Murray, averaging basically 28, 29 points per game. We need to see, I'm not going to say the same sort of like scoring production from Bam, but we need to see the impact that Bam has had throughout this entire Miami run, not even just this playoff run, but from years past, where he has been Defensive Player of the Year candidate, an All-NBA level player. We need to see that Bam in order for them to even have a chance. Because like you mentioned, Denver has so many advantages over this team, but one of the things that they don't have is the physicality factor, and Bam has to really set the tone there.
I think you make a great point about Bam because I think the biggest thing is just the fact that Nikola Jokic's rebounding ability was a big time equalizer in the series against the Los Angeles Lakers. That was one of the biggest things. I mean, there was a point in some of those games in the series where Nikola Jokic was out rebounding the Lakers as a team for at least
Yes.
a half. You know what I mean? I think it was I believe it was either game 2 or game 3 where Jokic was quite literally on par with the Lakers at halftime in terms of like or near halftime in terms of total rebounds. Um so I think the biggest thing for this team is going to be the battle on the boards. That's another reason why I think that, again, a big time rebounding guard in Bruce Brown, a big time rebounder in Aaron Gordon. Those are two guys that help set the tone from a physicality standpoint. But I think I also agree with you in what Nikola Jokic does on the boards and what that means for them as well. I don't think that Jokic can necessarily keep Bam Adebayo in check as a rim defender, but I think that if Bam Adebayo is not going to be aggressive offensively and make Nikola Jokic work defensively, then this series only gets easier for the Nuggets. And I think that plays into their
Yes.
favor, like you're saying.
100%. And that's going to be another key matchup. I mean, Anthony Davis was having trouble with Jokic all series. So Bam, it's a tall task, but I think that he has shown in the past that he is able to rise up to the occasion. He didn't do it in these conference finals, but they definitely need it here in the NBA finals. But Jay, the all in all, the final words for this series. Who do you have winning, and in how many games?
I am going to go with I'm going to go with the Denver Nuggets, and I'm going to take them in 6 games. I think Miami is good enough, physical enough, and fine-tuned enough to be able to make this a competitive series. The most important game, there are 2 games that are very important to me in terms of how this series will shape out. How will the Nuggets respond in game 1 after a 9-day layoff? And does Miami strike first in terms of making sure that they maintain their home court advantage in game 3? Game 1 and game 3, I think, are seriously indicative matchups for how this series will shake out. I think the winner of those games will give us a lot of intel as to whether or not this will be a long series, whether this will be a competitive series. So I'm taking Denver in 6.
Denver in 6. That is a very, very good prediction. For myself, not only going to give you a prediction, but I'm going to tell you exactly how the series is going to go.
Okay, I'm listening.
Give me the Nuggets in 7, and this is going to be the narratives we're going to be hearing throughout the series.
Okay.
First 2 games, the Jokic and the Denver Nuggets, they're going to show that they're just too much offense, too much for that. It's like too much scoring for the Miami Heat to handle. They're going to be like, oh, why do we think there's going to be competitive? Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., that's just too much offense, and then the Heat just doesn't have enough players to counteract that, especially with the way the Nuggets role players are playing. They go back home to Miami. Miami's going to take both games at home. And then the conversation is going to shift. Oh, they got Nikola Jokic out of rhythm. Oh, they got the Nuggets offense out of rhythm. The Miami Heat are just imposing their will and really just getting into the Nuggets' head. And then it just becomes this back and forth chess battle between 2 of some of the best coaches in the league, Michael Malone, Eric Spoelstra, a good chess matchup which ends in Denver game 7, in which the Denver Nuggets, it won't be a 1 possession, 2 possession game. I think it's going to be a close one, but it's going to end in like an 8-9 point win where the Denver Nuggets do end up victors. I think that we're going to see the best of both teams at some point in this series, and that's where the narrative is going to keep flipping. Like, oh yeah, we forgot the Miami Heat. That's what they do best. They get inside their opponent's heads. They kind of mess with their flow. And the Denver Nuggets, they've shown all playoffs long the depth, the star talent. We're just better than you. We're just better than you from top to bottom. That's just how it's going to go, and I think that this is going to make for a very entertaining finals. Is it something that NBA wants? There's no Lakers, there's no Celtics. Is this exactly what the NBA wants? I don't know. But as an NBA fan, this is something that is super, super interesting to me, and I think that this series is just gonna go in this fashion. I think it's gonna end in a 7-game thriller. Give me the Nuggets in 7.
I think that's a great narrative to keep, or a great set of narratives to keep an eye out on. It'll be interesting to see how we follow throughout the series. Obviously, we'll be covering the entire series front to back until somebody wins the championship. It'll be interesting to follow the narratives as we go along to see if they play out the way you mentioned, because I think there's a high possibility there that you might be on to something in terms of not only how competitive this series is, but of course, on top of that, what kind of things we're going to be talking about on a night-to-night basis in terms of how this series could play out. So it'll be fun to follow it. It'll also be interesting to see how these two teams adjust. One of the biggest things that I saw beforehand is before actually logging on for the pod was that Eric Spoelstra is the second longest tenured coach in the league with a single team, and Michael Malone is actually the fourth.
Yes.
So not only is there a lot of continuity in terms of these teams, but there's a ton of continuity in terms of these head coaches. And that doesn't just count for their own individual experience. It counts for what they've been able to do with the guys that they've gotten here to this point. So not only this is a chess match from the sense of two veteran head coaches who have been there, done that in a lot of different ways, but these are two guys who have basically raised these two teams from the ground up. And now it's kind of seeing which guy's method comes out on top.
It's going to be an extremely entertaining series. We've got the coaching head. We have the coaching matchup. We have the star matchup. Both, like I mentioned, both teams' role players have been an absolute fire since the start of the playoffs. It's going to be interesting to see how the series pans out. Let us know down below what your prediction on this series is. This NBA Finals is going to be absolutely crazy, starting on Thursday, June 1st. And we're going to be, like Jay mentioned, we're going to be covering it all series long. It's going to be a fun one, man. It's going to be an absolutely fun series. But we are almost reaching the end of today's episode. But before we go, we do have our final segment, which is the return of the quiz. And I have another great one for you, Jay, today surrounding the NBA Finals. And if you remember the last quiz, it has a similar flavor to it.
Okay.
Jay, I'm going to need you to name me the top 10 highest points per game in finals history. But the same caveat applies. It doesn't matter how many games they play.
Oh, that's sick.
It doesn't matter. And technically it's a top 11 because there are two guys tied for number 8. So it's a top 11 technically.
Oh, word? Okay.
But yeah, just roll off some names. Let's see if you can name the top 10. Let's see if you can get this. LeBron is he's one of the guys tied for number 8 at 28.4. Michael Jordan, number 4 all time, 33.6. This MJ was just a killer in the finals.
AI.
One of the guys who had one finals appearance but gets in at number 2, 35.6 points per game. That was an ultimate carry job from AI.
Yeah, for real. Kareem
Abdul-Jabbar is not on this list.
Wow, that's nuts.
I think because he went to the finals so many times, and especially near the end of his tenure with the Lakers, he wasn't scoring as much. But
good point. What about Larry?
Larry Bird is not on this list, surprisingly.
That's brutal. Okay, okay, this gets interesting now. Let's see.
There's a good mix. There's a good mix of current and former players too. It's a good mix.
Okay. Curry.
Curry's not on this list, surprisingly.
Really?
Either.
Oh, yeah. Crap. Let's get some of the more recent dudes and let me just spitball. Is J-Tay on this?
Tatum is not on this list, no.
Okay. Just want to get him out of the way. Is Jimmy on this list?
Jimmy is not on this list either.
Okay. I wanted to see if some of the recent guys were already handled. Oh man. Okay. Let's think.
This spreads
what
to
about
what
about Magic? What? Is Magic up there?
Surprisingly not. Wow, no, he's not on this list either.
That's insane. Huh.
There's one current player in the top 3, and he has made one finals appearance, but he won.
Dirk? Well, no, he made more than one finals, but still, is Dirk up there?
No, he is not.
Hakeem?
Hakeem is not on here. Wow, this is crazy.
This is brutal. Wow.
Yeah.
Shaq
is there. You go. Shaq is number 7, 28.8.
Okay. Kobe?
Kobe is not here. No.
Wow, this is brutal. This is a crazy list. Um,
Number one
holy
is
cow.
crazy. Number one is crazy. Here's a hint for number one. It's a tough one, but he made the finals twice. But he won his only championship he's won was in the mid '70s for the Warriors.
What what the heck? Um,
Mister, this guy had a very weird jump shot. He had a very awkward.
what the heck? Okay, I'm about to just start naming current guys.
Yeah.
You let me know. Kevin Durant.
Number 6 all time, 30.3.
All right, we cooking with grease now. Giannis.
Number 3, he's the guy
Okay,
in the top 3.
We're cooking with grease.
35.2 points per game in that one finals.
Okay, we're cooking with grease. Okay, I'm gonna stick with the big guys. He never won, but I'm sure he was balling. Is Elgin here?
No,
He's not. Oh
he's
my
not,
gosh!
but
Oh, that's brutal.
you're on the right track. You're on the right track with that era of the Lakers.
Jerry's on here.
Jerry West, number 5 all time, 30.5 points per game in the final.
Holy cow! Okay, how many more guys we got?
Let's see. We have number 1 still to go. We have number 6, someone who was tied for number 8, number 9, and number 10. So that's
You
like
still have number 1. What the heck?
Mid-
I'm trying to
70s
think of
War-
who.
mid 70s Warriors player. He shot underhanded. That's what I mean by awkward jump shot. He shot underhanded in the mid 70s.
What the heck? I'm trying to think of mid 70s guys.
He's probably like one of the best players of that era, even though it's probably one of the worst eras of basketball. But averaged 36.3 points per game in the finals.
The fact that you said 70s is like I was gonna be like, okay, white guy of the era, but then it's like,
Yes.
but okay. So what's this like Rick Barry or something?
Yes,
random? Oh,
Rick
okay, because you said
Barry.
underhand shot, and I'm like, okay, like what the heck?
36.3 points per game he averaged in the 2 finals he played in.
Okay, all right, all right. Whatever floats your boat, dude. What the heck? Okay, so what other 2 spots are we at?
Okay, so you're missing number 6. You're missing number who's tied for 8th. It's another 50s, 60s player, but he's won 1 championship. And then number 9 and 10 are 2 current players as well.
They're current players.
We have out of the 4 guys you're missing, you have 3 current players.
Oh crap.
2 of the current players have only made 1 finals. No, Devin Booker, number 9 all time, 28.2 points per game.
I like it.
Number 10, he made the finals, I think, how many times? Twice? Yeah, he made the finals twice. Big shots, man. Big shots in the finals.
Kyrie
Irving, 27.7 points per game in the finals. He just cracks the list. So you're missing number 6. You're missing the person who was tied for 8th. One of them is a 60s, 50s, 60s started player, and one is current. I'm surprised you haven't said the current one yet. Like, you went through all of the best in the league, and you still haven't mentioned this guy.
Damn, because I was thinking like Russ, maybe.
No.
Oh.
Think connections to Russ.
AD?
Not AD. Oh my gosh, you said AD? Come on.
I'm just saying, Bo AD was a monster. I'm just saying.
No, not with that, but it sounds so familiar, so like similar. Think about it. AD.
Wait, but we said Kevin Durant though.
No, you didn't. You didn't say.
I
Kevin.
didn't.
No.
Oh crap. Okay, that's stupid. Then I thought I said KD already.
No, number 6 all time, 30.3 points per game.
Oh my gosh, that's nuts. Okay. I thought I said him already. That's my fault.
Okay, no worries. And now you're missing the guy who's tied with LeBron for 8th all time, 50s, 60s guy. Probably the best player of his era for sure, I guess, in the 50s. But he won a championship with the Atlanta Hawks.
Oh, okay. I have to know. This is Bob. Yeah.
It's Bob Pettit.
I'm sorry. Resident of Atlanta, Georgia. I have to know that one.
Yeah, Bob Pettit is number 8 all time, tied with LeBron James. It's a weird list, man. It's a weird list.
Yeah, dude. There was a lot of dudes that I named on there that you were like just barely missed it, or they were clear off the list, and I'm like, dude, what?
It's crazy.
That's crazy.
It's a good mix of players, man. Honestly, I completely forgot how dominant Giannis's run was in that finals. Like, I think that's what surprised me the most. I'm like, oh yeah, he averaged like 35 in that finals. One of the best,
Yeah.
one of the best finals performances of all time. So yeah, good on him. But yeah, that was another great quiz. Let us know down below if you have any other quizzes you want us to do. That one was pretty crazy, but so we got to tackle some all-time greats from all generations for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
100%. But yeah, this is where we're gonna end today's episode. Thank you guys for watching or listening. Jay, anything to say to these beautiful people before we sign out?
Bro, all I know is that we have a ton of NBA Finals content ready for you guys. With the fact that this should be a pretty competitive series, as me and TV have kind of alluded to with our picks. Watch out for this off-season content, though. Me and TV were literally talking about it before the podcast. We have a ton of interesting ideas on the docket in terms of evergreen stuff to talk about, considering that this is going to be a pretty active offseason, I think, between the potential free agents, big names and smaller names. Still a bunch of head coaching jobs available across the league. This new CBA, Victor Wembanyama. Like, there's a ton of stuff to still really get into in terms of this NBA offseason. So definitely stay tuned to the Hit Your Free Throws podcast, because I'm trying to tell you, we got some stuff. We got some stuff.
Yeah, 100%. Should be a good one. Again, let us know down below, all this stuff, like all your thoughts on today's podcast, and of course your predictions for the NBA Finals, which is going to be absolutely nuts. But as we're getting to today's episode, thank you guys for watching, listening. Remember to follow our personal socials down below. Remember to check out the YouTube, all the socials that Hit Your Free Throws on TikTok and Instagram, and just continue to show your support in any way possible. That would be highly, highly appreciated. But this is where we're going to sign off. Thank you guys for watching. This is TV. That's Jay. We're both signing off. Take it easy, guys. Peace.
Peace.